welcome, good morning, good afternoon, good evening around the world, and a warm welcome to our Spotlight Special at the Global Design Thinking Alliance. My name is Uli Weinberg, and I'm the director of the HPI School of Design Thinking, the Hasso-Plattner Institute in Potsdam in Germany, and I'm also the president of the Global Design Thinking Alliance, the GDTA. And I will have the pleasure to guide you through our today's program, which is a very special one. And first of all, we have a welcome note from Professor Christoph Meinel, the director of the Hasso-Plattner Institute in Potsdam, who is actually currently in New York and cannot make it in person, but he recorded a video for us. And I would like to ask Steffi, who is so nice to handle all the back here, Steffi Schwertfeger, to run the video. And before you run the video, I just want a short note here because you have the netiquette slide. So what we are doing here is foremost a session with speakers and a panel session. So it is appropriate not to switch on your video and your microphone during the presentations. Please raise your hand. Actually, use also chat if you have questions, because we have Q&A sessions for sure after the first two talks. And also choose between the speaker view and the gallery view. And for those of you who want to have a really nice experience with the speakers, just go to your video settings and hide non-video participants. That always gives you a chance to have just the speakers, and all the rest are faded off if their video is switched off. So, but now we can play the welcome note from Christoph Meinel.
Ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome to our GDTA Spotlight Special. I'm happy to welcome you. Christoph Meinel, my name. I'm the head of the Hasso-Plattner Institute and have the chair for Internet Technologies and Systems here. This new GDTA format, the Spotlight Special, is focused to the IEEE 7000 standards. So the Global Design Thinking Association is closely connected with all these activities. These activities to develop standards for an ethical-based engineering. The standard will be released in Europe end of the year in November 2020. And of course, the HPI Design D-School and the HPI Design Thinking activities are a natural partner for such value-based engineering. And we are happy to have Sarah Spiekermann with us. She was a promoter and a driver of the development of this standard. Together with others, she initiated and implemented this very important initiative. And as an Institute for Digital Engineering, we welcome very much such kind of activities. Originally, our event was planned as a conference in New York, in the Hudson Yard, in our HPI floor. We have in the new building there, but a number of you have restrictions with traveling due to Corona, so we switched to have this event as an online event. Sorry for that. It would be much better if we could personally interact with each other. I already welcomed Sarah Spiekermann from the Wirtschaftsuniversität in Wien as a keynote speaker, but I also very warmly welcome Dr. Konstantinos Karachalios, IEEE Standards Association manager, who was very much involved in the development of this new IEEE 7000 standard. There are more colleagues from around the world, Shan and Ali Hessami, which are actually designing a certification procedure for IEEE, for implementing this IEEE 7000 standard. And we have a number of colleagues from big enterprises like IBM and SAP, also from NGOs, which are involved in taking such a standard and changing the developers of IT systems to accept, to work, to use a standard. So I already mentioned IEEE 7000 standard, focus on ethical-based engineering, and this is a real challenge because with such new technologies, particularly in the area of artificial intelligence, the questions how IT systems can be designed in a way that they support humans in their work, that they provide really help to our social life and not disturbing such things or bringing bad things. So we need fairness, we need diversity, we need all this in our society. And when IT systems more and more take over the role of organizing our society, form the basic for many activities in the real life, in the work, in our leisure time, then it's very important to reflect how we should design such systems that they support the human values. So the Hasso-Plattner Institute, the HPI D-School, is a partner in such kind of thinking, such kind of developments. So since 15 years, this year we will celebrate 15 years anniversary of the HPI D-School. Since 15 years, the user and to see users and humans in the middle of technological developments, in the middle of digital developments. This is a focus all over all the time of the D-School. And for that reason, D-School says, yes, this is a very important activity. We try to support it as we can. By the way, already 2 years ago in the 2020 Global Design Thinking Alliance Conference, the IEEE 7000 standards was a core topic, was already introduced. The development were introduced and discussed. And this was also the start of the discussion of such value-based design processes among this association, among all the D schools, all the universities that provide D programs, design thinking programs, which work together in our GDTA association. By the way, in the Hasso-Plattner Institute, we developed another approach, the Clean IT initiative, which also very much fits into this development and into this space of ethical-based engineering activities. The idea of this Clean IT initiative is to focus the development of digital systems, of software systems, more in a sustainable way. So the idea is the digital technologies are a very important factor to reach the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, but at the same time the digital technologies need a lot of energy and have today a big carbon footprint. So digitalization activities around the world have twice as much carbon footprint, twice as big carbon footprint, like all the air traffic. So also this activity, clean activity, fits into what we want to drive together with the IEEE 7000 standard activities. So I'm happy to open this floor to discuss the relevance of such value-based engineering methods, particularly for new developments in the artificial intelligence. We focus on universities, education, but in the same, with the same importance to the big companies, to the big corporations, to small startups which develop such technologies, NGOs that help to implement this, so to strengthen the impact of such developments for our social life around the world. So happy to have you here in our event, and I wish you fruitful discussions and interactions around this topic, the ethical-based engineering.
So thank you very much, Christoph Meinel, actually, who is currently in New York and who gave us here a warm welcome from the Hasso-Plattner Institute to our Spotlight Special, and which is organized as, which is actually a normal session. Our monthly session is the Spotlight session. This is a very special one. And as you already figured out, we are recording the conference sessions here, and the video summary will be available later on the GDTA website, and also hopefully on the IEEE and the WU websites. And a few words about the GDTA. We founded the GDTA 5 years ago at the 10th anniversary of the HPI D-School with the goal of anchoring design thinking more deeply in the international educational landscape, networking innovative educational institutions, intensifying the research on design thinking, and further developing also the design thinking mindset globally. And we do have a yearly conference, as Christoph Meinel also pointed out 2 years ago. We had a conference, we were focusing already on the IEEE standard on ethical-based engineering. And this year, our yearly conference will be held embedded in the DCON Festival. That is a conference we are doing every 5 years now, since 2012. And it will be a 3-day international event on design thinking, and will take place from October 12 to 14 in Cape Town, South Africa. And value-based, ethical-based engineering will for sure be a part of that conference as well. And you'll find more information on our website, gdta.org. But today, we are meeting for a very special spotlight. That's how we call it, why we call it the Spotlight Special. Usually we have a 60-minute conference, mini conference, actually, with design thinking experts on the panel, talking about the latest research, about new things in education and design thinking impact. And today we have a 2.5-hour session, which was, like Christoph Meinel was pointing out, originally planned to be held in our New York office, the HPI office. Since so many people were saying, no, it's still pandemic and we can't travel, we thought we move it to a squeezed version in the internet, an online version. So it's not a full day conference, just a 2.5 hours, but that is also a long time already for the internet here, for our online experiences. And I'm happy that it's also not just a GDTA thing, it is actually a cooperation between IEEE and Wirtschaftsuni Wien. And I'm really happy about the cooperation, which started more than about 2 years ago. More than 2 years ago, we got in contact. And but when we planned the session here today, we could not have imagined that the political situation would escalate to such an explosive extent as we are currently experiencing. But we did not hesitate for a second to hold the event despite the war situation in Ukraine. More than ever, it is obvious that what an important role a common foundation of values plays in social coexistence. And with that, I would like to welcome our first speaker here for today, Konstantinos Karachalios. I'm very happy to welcome you here again, Konstantinos. Please switch on your video. Konstantinos is the managing director of the IEEE Standards Association. I think we had the first contact in 2018 through Sarah Spiekermann and Meilin Fung. So from both sides, I got information there is an interesting person, we should talk. And I met you as a person very concerned about the developments in AI and robotics and the usage of personal data, especially for young kids. And that was the reason why we did also a project together in 2020 in the summer with our students about age-appropriate design. That was the topic. And Konstantinos will give us the bigger picture about the IEEE 7000 standard which he was the person to drive it in the IEEE environment. So thanks a lot for being here, Konstantinos. Switch on your microphone. The stage is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm really delighted to be today here virtually with you and our audience. And there has been Christian has really brought the major points why this is important, why we're here. I would like just to say something why it is IEEE that is here today and not another organization. Well, we represent somehow the global techno-scientific communities, not only the field of electrical engineering, as you are well aware. And we have a huge impact and influence worldwide, not only through our standards, for instance, Wi-Fi and Ethernet, these are our standards, but more importantly, about the attitude we're creating. So we're a very peer-based organization. And this is very serious because we create narratives about ourselves. And this has a very lasting and long impact. So it is very important how we see our profession and how we deal with this. And our tagline is advancing technology for humanity. And the point is, this is very ambitious because this is not really what happens. We're advancing technology for sure, assuming this is good for humanity. Is it? Is it always? I mean, we see a lot of cases, and this is probably the most of cases, that technology is not produced just in nihilo or in vacuum. It is produced to give competitive advantage to a company against another company, to a nation against another nation. And we see this happening in real time now, what it means technological supremacy. So advanced technology is not per se good for the entire humanity, maybe good for some groups of people. Now, our ambition is to democratize this technological knowledge and also to convince our peers, ourselves, to do a better design job from the beginning. And what do I mean by this? This is not just wishful thinking. These technologies that we're talking here about, which are really, I could say, they're very intrusive and immersive for us. These technologies are, and also the way they are produced and coded and so on, increasingly complex. And the good thing about this is that the bosses, let's say, or the shareholders, they don't really know what the system architects and the coders are doing, what are the real possibilities they have. So the black box is not only a black box between company X and company Y, it is a black box also hierarchically. The people really on the top don't always know what the people down there are doing. So there is a space of freedom there that opens up, and the different possibility of managing also. And we should really assume these possibilities. Now, regarding management, this is not our business in IEEE, but regarding design, it is. So we thought, and we know this is the case, that the system architects and the coders, they do not use the space of freedom that they have in a good way. mostly they are doing terrible things. And sorry to say that. And because this is, we see what is happening around us. In particular, I'm not very pleased to see how they have been really treating our children, making them really addictive, and this on purpose, not by, let's say, by coincidence. It was on purpose. And so there is zero innocence there. We cannot let it pass anymore. No, we're good people doing just good work and other people are screwing this up. This is not the case. We don't buy this anymore. So what needs to be done? So 7,000 is the beginning of an answer to this question. No more and no less. We thought we must give the good people there, or the people who are really, let's say, they have this freedom, the opportunity to do a better work by better design methodology, offering them the possibility to think about what they are doing before they are doing it, before it is too late. And we were very pleased when we met with Sarah, who had started not only thinking about this, he had published it, and what he had published was halfway the standard already. We thought, why don't we make this an open standard and try to propagate through the world? And the way we do standards, it is, I mean, in the European context, standard is something that comes from above. It is a kind of directive or so on. Not in our case. In our case, when we say standard, it is more specifications which are developed through peers. It is from ourselves to ourselves to do a better work. And they work. And nobody imposed this on us. We do it because it makes sense. And this is the beauty of it, and this is its power. We are not waiting for regulators to tell us what to do. If we are convinced, then we're doing it ourselves. And of course, a regulation is helpful, and legislation is also helpful. But we should assume our part of responsibility and start working before it is too late. And also convince the policymakers, the regulators, they have to do their job too. And believe me, we are doing this too. And this works. And the 7,000 is a wonderful example. It is the first of our, the first we started in this realm. And it took many years to accomplish, not because of our bureaucracy, but because it took time for people to agree on the terminology, what is ethical, and what are the priorities. These are very difficult things. It is not about interoperability. It is about values, and different people have different values. But we are very pleased at the end we managed it, and we have now something and that people can start working with. And to conclude here my short introduction, it is a great privilege to cooperate with the Hasso-Plattner Institute and the Global Design Thinking Alliance, because you are our target group. It is the designers and the people who are teaching design. So this is the perfect fit to start this dialogue and to see how we can introduce this type of thinking in your design thinking, because it is absolutely necessary. And when we started several years ago to develop this, the question was, what are you doing there, Konstantinos? You are creating problems. I mean, you are going to slow down innovation. Where do you see the problem? Well, I believe that now this is very clear that we did the right thing. There is now an increasing demand of design methodologies that take into account these, I call them contextual aspects of technology. They may be ethical, they may be transparency, it may be about reducing of bias or accountability. It is so ethical is a very broad term, and we mean all these things. It is not telling people what is good and what is bad. We are not manichaeistic. So we did the right thing, and there is definitely a demand. And I think the people who get trained in these things will have also a very interesting professional advantage, because it is not sufficient anymore. No, it is not about being sufficient. It is wrong to assume that these systems are purely technical. They are not. They are socio-technical. And if we do not understand this dimension, then we're going to do a very bad design, and at the end, somebody's going to pay the price for it. And right now, it is our children who pay the big price for it. And I think it is time we change this. Thank you, Uli, for this opportunity. Thank you, Sarah. And I would like to thank all my collaborators who are attending here today, who did this work. I am not an expert. I was just supporting them to do this wonderful work. So the floor is yours again.
Thank you very much, Konstantinos. Thanks for the bigger picture you were giving us, and also for moving your ideas into IEEE and make a standard and make it happen. Make it happen that there's a standard around that. Actually, I got the pleasure to be witnessing and a part of the European start of the IEEE standard in Vienna, which was in November last year. And it was at Sarah Spiekermann's university, and she was actually the host. And I'm happy that you are here and give us an even deeper insight in what the values mean. And I also had the chance to be a part of the first value-based engineering workshop, which was ever done a few weeks ago. And Konstantinos, who was talking about, about this, that he was giving trouble to the developers, and he's reducing the innovation power. And after the 3 days, I had the feeling, no, that is not the case. Actually, a value-based mindset, which is what Sarah Spiekermann, Konstantinos, and the others in IEEE is bringing to the world now, is actually also, it's another aspect. It's a different view on innovation, and it's a highly, highly important view. And it was, for me, it was adding on the ways of innovation we are following since 15 years now. So I'm very happy that Professor Sarah Spiekermann is here with us. She's the head of the Institute for Information Systems and Society at Vienna University of Economics and Business, a beautiful university. I couldn't believe it to see that kind of architecture and to be into that. And she's also the vice chair of the IEEE 7000 standard. And her first visit, I think it was 2016 or so, and when she came to HPI to visit the D-School, we had the first meeting, and at that time, I didn't completely understand. I didn't understand what you were talking about, and it took me some years to really get it, and also to find out how important that is for the design thinking community. And Sarah will get us up to speed now on what value-based engineering is and the IEEE standard. Before you start, Sarah, I just want to say to our participants here, collect your questions, please. And you can also start putting them in the chat already. We'll have also the chair of the IEEE standard, Ali Hessami. He is also here on the call. And after Sarah's talk, we'll have a Q&A session together with Konstantinos, with Sarah, and also with Ali. So please feel free to collect your questions. And now, Sarah, the stage is yours. Thanks for joining here.
Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation, and also giving me the opportunity to present value-based engineering with IEEE 7000 to so many global design thinking representatives and schools and people who might be interested to take this baby on and develop it and make something great out of it and help a lot of companies with the approach. So the goal of my talk today, I hope you are seeing my slides. Do you, yeah?
Yes,
yeah,
we do.
Wonderful. So you see first impressions of the visual language that's developed around the approach. That's the greatest fun part. Yeah, my goal in today's talk is to show you how the approach works, what some core terminology is around it, and what you can expect from it, what benefit it produces for companies. and for innovation projects. When we started in 2016, I think we started at a time where first time ethics became important around IT. It was the ethical threats associated with IT were less about data protection and security, which were already on the table at the time with the GDPR coming up. But a lot of the discussion focused around super intelligent AI that would be coming up, and Elon Musk and Bill Gates were warning us that we really need to control AI in order to not have a doomsday one day with that technology. And I mean, no matter to what extent you really believe in the super intelligence coming up, one thing is for sure, a lot of the global institutions became active. The OECD, IEEE itself, but also large corporations like Microsoft and IBM, and the European Commission became active in starting to think about how AI could be regulated around ethics. And what happened is that all of these big institutions followed a similar approach in that they formulated a number of principles that they'd want to see society and institutions and innovation projects follow. Principles like privacy, dignity, well-being, control over technology, transparent technology, technology that hasn't got any biases towards certain people. So in an interesting article in Nature Machine Intelligence, some researchers found that by 2020, we had over 80 of these principle lists. Even though I think these lists of values are important, I don't think that they really give guidance to engineering on how to do a better job. Because if you think about a term like dignity, how is an engineer actually taking this principle and putting it into practice? What is dignity? So that is a huge challenge with those lists. And then the thing is that these the people who have met here together, and I put a few of the pictures of the people who were the closest allies in finishing IEEE 7000. You see they are from all over the world and major experts in system engineering mostly. They thought differently, and they knew that we have to tackle a much deeper challenge than just putting up a few principles. We need to also think about the situation we have right now in companies the past 15 years, perhaps a little bit also through the agile form of development. We see a lot of software quality problems. We see non-transparent algorithms, black boxes. We have unfair treatment of human actors, biased systems. We see hardware quality problems. The Boeing 737 MAX crashes were largely due to the problem of the human-computer interface, where the pilots didn't know what the machine was doing. We see business model problems. Most of the people on the call here know about Zsuzsanna Zubov's book on surveillance capitalism, that it is not the quality of the technology that sells anymore, that the personal data that's collected about people at the background. We see complexity challenges because there is almost no standalone system of interest anymore these days, but any system is almost interconnected with many other processors around. So a company faces huge challenges to create an umbrella of responsibility together with its partners. We see that that responsibility is difficult even within one company, depending on the corporate culture. The VW case showed clearly how classical engineering departments are facing ethical challenges. And finally, and last but not least, the digital world has a huge CO2 footprint and has a huge issue in its supplies with rare earths and so on. So all of these issues are around, and if you want to build a process model for ethical system design, which is a baseline process for any system, how to walk an entrepreneur and development teams from idea to practice, then you have to think about all these issues and ensure that things are not going wrong. And that's a huge challenge. Not to speak, I forgot actually the last one, which is in the social dilemma and all those Netflix series right now where and Konstantinos talked about it, where we make people addicted, where people are rioting on Capitol Hill because the social networks are not designed with a view to ethics. So this is the situation where we are in. And there is another thing. 90% of startups fail. So we don't even have a lot of issues with digitalization and its effects and its making, but obviously the young companies that are trying to make money on it and that's trying to strive fail. And if you look at if you look into the reasons why young companies fail, there are several of them. Some of them are that they can't deal with the complexity, and that complexity is also because they are not small systems of interest and that can then direct everything, but they are dependent on partners. Small companies fail also because it's hard for them to motivate their staff. And why is it difficult to motivate their staff? Because often you find an attitude in these companies, like Elizabeth Holmes' case, Theranos is a very good one for that. Founders often take a winner-takes-all attitude as they pursue their personal ideas of what might work, rather than delving deeply down into what I call the dormant value potential of their stakeholders. So small companies are driven by some founder who gets a lot of money these days and very quickly so, but the true value potential and what is there is not really pursued. So a lot of reasons why we thought value-based engineering's IEEE 7000 must tackle this, must address this. And you see already in this introduction that this goes far beyond a few value principle lists and some transparency in the system and privacy in the system. No, with value-based engineering using 7000, what we achieve is that we are giving meaning to organizations and their staff, meaning to startups and to young people who want to create value with technology, building value-laden technology, deeply aware of stakeholder needs and potential ethical issues, and not only going for quick money. Also, IEEE 7000 is challenging organizations to find the right partners and to build a system of interest embedded in a wider system of systems that can live up to a certain ethical responsibility. Also, by pursuing IEEE 7000, naturally, if a startup does that, it will certainly comply with the EU AI regulation that's coming up, and also the Digital Markets and Service Act. All those regulations are aiming to make companies behave more ethically. And by following IEEE 7000, it's possible, it's put into their business model and into their processes that the system flows more in line with what people and society expect. And so there is less risk for investors also to put money into companies that are not worth it. So now, how does 7,000 flow? I want to give you an overview of the various process stages. You see here that 7,000 value-based engineering with 7,000 has 3 phases. The first one is concept and context exploration. The second is value exploration. And the third is then an ethically aligned design. And some people are asking, so what is 7,000 then in relation to what you call value-based engineering? Well, in our working group, we actually wanted to give the, not only have a number, 7,000, but we wanted to give the child a name. And so we called IEEE 7,000, what we do there, we call it value-based engineering. And I have been working very hard to make the standard that has 85 pages and is not so easily accessible. Naturally, it's like a law, it's a complex text. I want to make it also accessible, and companies must be able to run through it smoothly with a number of forms that you can just fill in with creative workshops around, but you have a database that finally shows compliance officers who want to give a certificate for 7,000 what you've done, So you run through these 3 processes that I'm going to present in a second. And every time you finish a process activity, you fill in certain forms, and then you can show to compliance officers that you are certifying your system to be ethically grounded. Now I will give you a short introduction in what these 3 phases consist of. And an important first phase is to prepare the grounds before you even build your system, your first, what design thinkers call the first viable product. Yeah, before you can build that, you have to run through all these 3 phases in order to ensure that your first viable product is actually one that you can work upwards from or continue to put into and develop in the market. In the first phase, preparing the grounds, I would want to describe it as follows. At the moment, when you start working on a project, for example, with a business canvas, most of you will be acquainted with that business canvas model that you show your venture capitalist. You try to innovate anything you could do to make money with. So that's a starting point very often today. Now we ask what you could do to create value, and not value in a monetary sense only, but value in a social sense and in a human sense and in an enriching sense for society. The next one is what you could do with a system of interest at hand to create value, because it's important, of course, in an engineering and IEEE context, we typically don't start greenfield, but we have a system of interest, perhaps a design thinking prototype even that has come out of a first design thinking workshop. So what could you do with such a system at hand to create value? And as I say that, I'm not talking about needs here. Yeah? Needs is a special kind of value, but there are a lot of values out there that you can cater to that people don't necessarily need, but where there is a dormant value potential. Then what could you do with a system of interest at hand to create value with the right partners? In the first phase, you know already that you cannot offer something to the market by yourself. You always depend on a number of interlinked systems. And you need to find the right partners at the beginning, also at least some of them, and screen whether the market is there for you to go to the market in an ethical way. So the right partners are being screened. And then finally, what you could do with a system at hand to create value with the right partners for the stakeholders. And that's something that the design thinking schools know very well, because they have been promoting, you guys have been promoting stakeholder interaction and empathy for a long time. And that is something where value-based engineering and design thinking comes really together, because we are deeply interested in going into the context and bringing stakeholders to the table, identifying in this first phase who should sit on the table. And to also have no fear to bring in, it's even in the standard, critical thinkers, critical NGOs, for instance, who are representing the people, the users, or the user groups that are vital for a system to be not only accepted, but loved. And when a company, a large company, plans to market its products in a certain region, in Japan or in Africa, we are envisioning that stakeholders from those regions are also invited to the table before the product is marketed to them. Yeah, so we have we look at all these considerations in the first phase. A part of that analysis, and an additional part of that first phase, is that we are looking at the data flows between the system of interests core. Here I have, like, sometimes I use a teddy bear as an example, but there can be any system of interest in this core. And then we model all the partners around and look at the data flows and look at where is personal data involved. And we look at where AI, external AI components are involved. And when it comes to external AI components, what the standard says is that if you are cooperating with an AI service, you should have control over, and this is the points that are in the standard, you should have control over the quality of the data that is used in the AI system. Yeah, as you, as a system of interest provider, you work with an AI partner, well, you should know what the quality of the data is that the partner uses that you want to work with. You should know about how that partner gets his data, the selection process is feeding the AI. You should know about the algorithm design, the evolution of the AI's logic. You should know whether your partner is using best available techniques. So this first phase of value-based engineering, where you don't even start designing the product. You have just component parts, and you know what it should be going forward to, you know what partners are out there, and you already see whether you actually have partners in your landscape that you can deliver an ethical service with. So that's a warm-up phase, yeah, but a pretty deep down analysis to begin with. So then in the next phase, second phase, I think that is a little bit a major heart, perhaps the heart of the standard itself, is where you try to identify the values that your system should bear, should carry, should work towards. And let me give you an example here. I take the teddy bear, not because it's such a funny, cute thing and children are involved, but finally it's a pretty tough biometric system that will be heavily regulated also in the AI Act. And these biometric systems, that is perhaps representative for the ubiquitous computing idea where we see everything networked in our households. Now, we have what we are seeking, what we are doing, what we are saying here in our standard is that children, users, are entering into a kind of relationship with the products, and the products, like a teddy bear, they bear values. And what does that mean? I give you an example here on the right side. a person sees an object like a teddy bear, and the teddy bear itself, the object, has certain value dispositions in it. But users, children, they don't see technology or properties or dispositions that are in the system. They just play around and know the look and feel of the object. For instance, the children or the people playing with a teddy bear will perceive that suddenly the teddy bear starts to talk and has a certain humanness about it. So there is what we humans in the interaction with our objects perceive as certain value qualities like humanness. We don't care about the technology. The technology must work. The value dispositions, the properties in the thing, yeah, like speech recognition and speech actuators and all of that, we don't see it. We just see the humanness. And now, the humanness, though, is a quality that really caters to a higher value, which is joy. Yeah. And I give you that example because by giving you that example, I explain what the value ontology looks like that we have built into the 7000 standard. And this is a 3-layered ontology, which is we have a high value, an ideal value like joy. We have value qualities like humanness that people really perceive and love or don't like. And then we have the value dispositions in the object that cater to the value qualities that enable them. And this value ontology, this wording, ideal core value, value qualities, they're called value demonstrators in the standard, value dispositions, this vocabulary is very essential because in today's discussions about values all over the place, everybody talks about values and nobody makes this distinction and has this precision of what is really going on because values are happening on those 3 distinct layers. And I'm very proud that we have put that ontology in the standard. It also helps us to understand what happens when values are undermined. This is perhaps the reason why we've started all that ethical decision. And you see here on the slide an example for a negative value situation where, again, a positive ideal core value, security, does not materialize because there are the wrong or absent value dispositions in the system. Here, you might have a lack of confidentiality. The teddy bear might share the data that it collects from a child with the outside world, or might have a database which is not perfectly encrypted in the back end. So there is a wrong or absent value disposition in the system, which leads to a quality we perceive, which is a lack of confidentiality. And that again caters to is the reason for the absence of a higher value called security. So you see this value ontology, which is I would say the backbone, the terminological and philosophical backbone built into the standard. Now, another aspect that is unique about value-based engineering with 7000 is that we do not only talk about technical values, transparency that everyone talks about is a technical value. Absence from bias in an AI is a technical value. Security is a technical value. But what we are most very concerned about in value-based engineering is what does technology do with the people? Yeah, what does it do to why are people going on Capitol Hill? Why are they rioting? Why is there so much envy online in social networks? Why is there so much hatred? Addiction. Yeah. So what I'm talking about here, and I give here I have the example where we know from research that young people are developing an inflatedness about themselves if they are sometimes online. So they lack the core value of prudence. What I'm talking about here is the virtues. So value-based engineering is looking at what does does technology do to our virtues? And how do we identify that? And now I'm coming to a corner piece, is that when we elicit the ethical implications of a system in a good sense, also good value implications as well as bad value implications. One core question is that we go back to virtue ethics, and we are actually asking the stakeholders to envision what would happen if a system was rolled out at scale, yeah, and what would happen to the character of the people, to the personal characteristics of the people using the system in the long run, if that system was ubiquitous. Here you see on the slide, what are the negative implications of the system for the character and or personality of direct and indirect stakeholders? That is, which virtue, harms or vices could result if the system was implemented at scale? That's the virtue ethical question we use. But we don't only build the 7000 standard on virtue ethics. We also have duty ethics and utilitarianism built into it. So we will also ask stakeholders to envision what would be the harms and what could be the benefits of the system if it was rolled out at scale, and what personal maxims or value priorities the stakeholders would absolutely want to see and protected in a system. So these three core questions that are part of the creative workshops that we are doing with the stakeholders help us to identify a long list of issues. And in fact, when we did research, in my institute, I'm very grateful that I have two PhD students, Katrin Wettner and Till Winkler, who have helped me to analyze amongst hundreds of students over the past years how, you know, young professionals who are studying information systems, but who typically have worked or work in companies for many years already, how do they answer these these ethical questions, utilitarianism, virtue ethics, and duty ethics? And what you see is, while they are criticizing the product or think about the product in these ethical terms, they identify a lot of issues, and they have a lot of ideas on how the product could be built in a better way so that negative issues don't arise or positive issues could be fostered. So we see an increase in creativity around what the product could do well. We see a boosting of creativity and product ideas here. That is what our research shows. We see a lot, I mean, 400, 260%, as we have three case studies here that I'm presenting you the data on, as a food delivery service, smart toys, telemedicine. Every time we play these three questions at the stakeholders, we see that many values are identified that are not seen if you do classical product road mapping. In the case that I'm going to present later on to you on the YOMA platform that we did for real with UNICEF in Africa, 56 value qualities could be identified as a result of this creative workshop. So this is about the scale you must plan for. It's a lot of values that come up in the stakeholder discussions. And these values need to be structured into clusters. This is what you see here on the right side. So we have a mechanism of taking this hugely unstructured data and then building value clusters. Now, some of these value clusters will naturally be about show things that might be undermined, like privacy, for instance. And what we see in the method is, in comparison to road mapping, that there are 10 times more issues that are seen that could go wrong. And thereby, what we achieve is that our stakeholders that we have tested the method with are also becoming more realistic in terms of whether they would invest into the system or not. So asking them these three ethical questions, whilst at the beginning 66% would, for instance, invest in a digital toy because they think that's the future, after answering these three ethical questions, there's only a third would be willing to invest. So you see here between the left and the middle pie that investors are becoming more realistic as whether they really want to go for such a technology. But then if they are able to make suggestions on how to improve the product, to adapt the design and to work towards an ethical design, then in the end, they would say, yes, I will in the majority, 91% would invest in the technology because they see an avenue, a technical avenue on how to address the potential negatives of a technology. So, so this investment path, if you want to, is a major reason why to convince venture capitalists and banks to invest in value-based engineering with IEEE 7000, because it leads to more realistic investment decision and shows a path to a more ethical design. But now, how do you get from so many value clusters, that you found with your stakeholders? How do you come and actually find a way down into the system? So we have those clusters and form and what we then do is we help companies prioritize them. We don't play and trade off values. No, we are prioritizing them. We are bringing them into an order. And as we bring them into an order, we consider several aspects. Of course, the business mission, because value-based engineering is not against companies, but it's about helping companies frame a value mission, right? So the business mission and the value mission is very closely aligned. We are telling companies to look at existing CSR, corporate social responsibility principles. We are saying companies to look at whether there are laws, for instance, around privacy. So then perhaps the privacy cluster that might not be have not been prioritized as so important moves up in the ranking because the laws are so strict about it. Or human rights principles, SDG goals, when there are lists out there that should be catered to or a company has committed to, then that obviously should influence the ranking of the value clusters. Okay, so once that is done, we go into ethically aligned design. And ethically aligned design, here the P7, the 7000 standard actually developed something completely new. That perhaps was the reason why, because as we developed something, a construct called ethical value requirement. So from these value issues that we see and from the value clusters that we want to cater to as a company, we translate those into ethical value quality requirements. These are defined as follows: organizational or technical requirements catering to values that stakeholders and conceptual value analysis identified as relevant for the system of interest. EVRs, also ethical value requirements, are like a bridge. They are a bridge between the philosophical and stakeholder names and views, and the system requirements and system features that we need for a system design. So I have here on screen some examples for what ethical value requirements look like. And what the title says is what I want to stress here. A value quality, if you have a core value like privacy and you have a value quality like an informed consent that caters to privacy, an ethical value requirement would say, what is it that needs to be in place? What are the criteria that need to be fulfilled in order for an informed consent to cater to privacy? So, and you see here on the slide It is an EVR is very precise. It says you have to meaningfully and comprehensively describe personal data processing, truly and voluntarily obtain user processing consent, etc. So in the EVRs, you can specify context-specific value conformance criteria that a system later on has to meet. And going from, and these, when you are in a project and you are formulating EVRs, and I was with Lohan, who is going to speak later, in the project, I am a privacy expert. I've done research 15 years and I know the GDPR very well. It was very important to come up with the right EVRs. IEEE is developing now conformance criteria for accountability and for transparency of systems. They have another standard on transparency. So these other standards and details of laws and conformance criteria can help to formulate the right EVRs. And you see here on the right side a person. This person is really important. I haven't talked about this person, even though his picture has been coming up earlier. You see it here and you see it here. In the IEEE 7000 standard, we are promoting a new profession. And this new profession is called a value lead. We need to educate value leads. And I think the GDTA would be in a wonderful spot to educate value leads. Take all your design thinkers and educate them to become value leads, because value leads are very important, not only in conducting the philosophical workshops and running companies through the ethical questions, but also to help them formulate EVRs. They have the knowledge of that, what the GDPR asks. They have the knowledge about human rights. They have the knowledge about existing conformance criteria for transparency and bias. And they help companies to then formulate EVRs based on the value qualities and core values that they prioritize for their company. So once that is done, EVRs are there, then you take the EVRs and you run them through a simple through simple risk logic that asks, how could the EVR be threatened and what are the technical and organizational controls that a company needs to use in order to mitigate the threat? This is a way that's pretty much standard in risk-based design. By this risk-based design, I think that if companies want to comply with the AI Act, well, they're in a very good position because they run through a risk-based design in order to identify their system requirements. And this is a table here, I don't go through the detail, which shows then how the EVRs are translated in the end into technical system controls. Okay, so now you have a very good, and all of this, by the way, you see here the numbers coming up, yes, is traced. So you can show actually also compliance by using these tables. These system requirements then go to any kind of iterative development. Ethically aligned design can be done then in an agile way to develop a system. And you can also have an ethical, you see also your ethical progression as you implement and put into your product roadmap those system requirements. Okay, so this is, with this, I have actually presented you the method. I'm trying to move on to the next slide, and I'm now just very quickly telling you about what the YOMA case was about, because after me, there will be Lohan Spies, the CTO of the YOMA platform, and he will be interviewed by Uli Weinberg. UNICEF approached me 2.5 years ago, and they said, we have a problem in Africa. There are so many talented people out there somewhere in the villages, and they are never seen, and they don't get access to the job market, and companies won't find them. Is there a possibility to build a platform to identify these young, talents? Yeah. And what was the approach 2 years ago? with the AI hype along. The first idea was we take a little AI company and we pool a lot of data, mobile phone data, learning platform data, and a payment platform and others. We pool 5 or 6 huge databases from various providers, and then we have an AI running over all of that data about young people, and we calculate somehow magically from this database who are the talents. This is a little bit still the logic when using AI. You think it's like a magic box, but okay, this is the way the thinking was in very, very early days. And then we worked with UNICEF through several iterations, and in the end, what we have created is that we saw, wow, these young people don't want their data to be mined. They want their own data to be put out there. They want to build their CVs. They want to control their CVs. They want to show who they are in a creative way. They want to do projects that are added to their CV. And so, and they don't want to leave potentially their villages. Companies shouldn't take them out of their communities. They want to be building up a respectful situation within their region. So those things came out of the 7,000 project. And now Lohan Spies is building this platform for UNICEF. I also like to tell the story because it shows that what 7,000 is doing, it's shifting companies from a technological sci-fi story or, you know, hype cycle thing into something extremely human, extremely social, and extremely beautiful. Yeah. So so there is a shift in the value mission, yeah, that is really happening. And my last slide now, to not run out of time, is on how do I see the design thinking schools now entering this territory together with IEEE and together with me in value-based engineering. Now, 2 years ago, as Uli said, I was already present in your GDTA conference, global conference, and I had this idea, okay, you do design thinking, and then it somehow goes into our process. But by now, I would see it, yeah, in this way. So I think design thinking is really great in the ideation phase, and the ideation and the context and concept exploration phase that we have is closely aligned. Yeah, we know already that a system is there. Okay. And we look for values and not only for needs, but I think there is a lot of design thinking benefit here. And then you build first prototypes. This is a perfect system of interest for us to start with. Where we are really complementing something is through the ethical methodology, the value exploration, where we use the philosophies and then also derive the ethical value requirements. This is where we see the sweet spot of value-based engineering. And then with that, we must start into agile system engineering. Now you see here the yellows, your yellows design thinkings, they also merge through value-based engineering into agile. Where I want to say that with EVRs, we develop the ethical system requirements with the risk-based approach. And with that, we can build the first viable product, because that first viable product will then be one where you can reliably build on and move from version to version into your technical future. But we ensure that the first viable product has a good architecture and has those things in place, like the grounds that don't make it too fragile and running into all the problems that I presented at the beginning of my talk. Yeah, this is where I want to close. I thank you very much. I want to, Uli and I have been talking with Claudia and others to think about how we might be able to roll out a training program. Value lead education is a core issue here, not only companies wanting to do value-based engineering, but also value lead education could be something where we could come together. I also want to thank my team. I already mentioned some of them already. Yeah, and you can get more information on the approach on these two websites at the moment. And I think Uli is working on a site, GDTA site. This is what our discussions will hopefully result in. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Thanks a lot. And I see a lot of people visiting here and listening to you. Please applaud to Sarah. And also thanks for being precisely on time, you know, with now we have 15 minutes for Q&As before we go into a little break. And for the Q&A, actually, I would love to see also to have Konstantinos switch the video on, and also Ali Hessami. Ali Hessami, is he on there? I don't see him. Yes, he's there. Professor Ali Hessami is actually the innovation director at Vega Systems, and he was the chair and technical editor of the IEEE 7000 standard. So he knows very well all about the standard and also about certification programs. So I was checking the chat, but all of you who want to ask a question, please switch on your video. Also, it's no problem. We can all switch on the video right now if you like, for the next 15 minutes. That might help us. Please raise your hand if you have a question or remark. I see a remark here from Natalie Matheson. Thank you for sharing your remarkable work. I'm excited to discuss this with the Canadian colleagues and discover how we can integrate it into the curriculum, which is actually a question we are asking ourselves as well. It's easier for us at the School of Design Thinking because we don't have a curriculum. And I thank you very much, Sarah, for also doing the first iteration of your visualization, how to interconnect with design thinking and moving into Agile. Any question from our GDTA community members here right now? Was it so clear from Konstantinos and also from Sarah?
She did it very, very precisely. She covered a lot of key points and very detailed, but still I'm trying to digest in more. So I will wait for others to question up. So excellent talk. Thank you.
I think I could imagine a question to the GDTA heads of schools or representatives here, because I would like to know from you whether you have considered working with values and not just needs, and whether you already have developed methods, or whether you seriously could imagine to embrace an approach like value-based engineering with such a standard. Is that something you could imagine doing?
There's Claudia.
Yeah, more as a
responding to that.
Yes, I mean, it's really responding to that, but also more like a food for thought and opening the ground for the other D-schools. I think from a design thinkers or design thinking perspective, the question of value has been implicitly built into the approach initially, because when we look at what we have been considering as the human-centric or human centricity approach in design thinking, it always has its implicit understanding of, we do not only want to understand people better, but we'd like to understand what they're really thriving for. So the user-centric approach as users and buyers of products and services was also not only about what do you need, but also why do you need that. So that value component was also initially built into it. But it kept, I would say, design thinking is around with us since, I would say, 2 decades. For the first decade, it kept to be to the human part. So it was only like bringing in the value perspective from that. Have we been considering untapped desires, needs, and therefore values from today's and tomorrow's users, buyers of our products and services? But with us and also the GDTA, the design thinking understanding in terms of the definition also moved along and saying we no longer consider the core group we're designing for today's and tomorrow's users / buyers of our products and services, but it's human beings, and it's also like taking a life-centered approach. So the value concept in itself implicitly got expanded in terms of trying to better understand whether with anything we create as an innovation, we're also going to make a positive impact. But the discourse in the, even though we don't talk about the discipline here when we talk about design thinking within the design thinking community, has limited itself still to that very close actor's perspective. And with the value-based engineering approach that you also not only presented here, but also have been developed further, it got into that broader scope in terms of whenever we are going to be creative as a human being, as a team, as an organization, we have to think from the beginning till the end about our impact. And in order to be able to make really a profound assessment, we have to look into this value perspective from its very beginnings. And I think for me, that's kind of not only the missing piece of the puzzle, but it's really the underlying groundwork of when you really think about being creative. So therefore, I think for me, at least, also I had the chance to work with you a bit throughout the last months and year in terms of also being able to attend the training, to see that this is really a missed foundation of design thinking if you really want to create innovations with an impact, not only for companies, but also within the system. So therefore, I think, yes, it does resonate a lot. And with that, I hand over to the director of the D-School in South Africa, Richard.
Thanks, Claudia. Sarah, thanks so much for a wonderful presentation. I'm actually on the steering group of YOMA, so it's lovely to see this work in practice, because I really do believe that the YOMA platform has been born out of originally a design thinking process that UNICEF went through, but also in the evolution of the ideas that emerged, and specifically the platform, having a very strong sort of value-based approach, which was wonderful to see. I guess my question is more around the concept of a value and helping people or organizations or young startups or designers understand what is a value and what isn't a value, and not get confused with other concepts, because I guess, and I'd love to hear sort of your feedback on it, but you know, what happens if you frame the value incorrectly because you don't really fully understand what a value is or isn't, and you sort of start off that wrong footing? How does the rest of the process filter out from there? And I guess I'm specifically thinking also from our context in Africa, if you just from a language perspective, you know, even here the word design means something very different in different languages. So the word value and using that, and whether there's other layers that one maybe needs to look at. Thank you.
Yeah, that's why it was so important to put a philosophical backbone into 7000. A value is not a preference. A value is not something where I say, this is beautiful, and you tell me, no, it's not beautiful. Values are born by objects, and they are brought about in qualities due to certain dispositions that an object possesses. If the object hasn't got that disposition, no value quality can arise. And no higher value can constitute, actualize, materialize. Now, this language of speaking about values helps you in stakeholder processes to discern a true value from a mere preference. And it also helps stakeholders when they get into conflicts and have various different, we still perceive values. So there is a subjective notion. You can only see, for instance, the security, the confidentiality in an object if you know about the dispositions, right? So there is a difference whether an expert looks at something or whether a layperson looks at something. And only through that vocabulary, you are able to come to a closed professional result of value discussions. This is certainly the major strength that IEEE 7000 has in value-based engineering, and that you won't find anywhere else.
If I may just introduce another dimension to thinking about values. The way we have articulated the standard, we are not there just to protect the values. We are there to also promote and foster values. So don't think in the terms of 7000 standard that this is just a philosophical risk management type enterprise. And we are sitting there saying, who's going to do harm? And we are there to teach them, assist them in protecting the, if you like, the end user, the citizens from that value harm. There is a kind of a duality about our perspective, that values can be fostered by a system that carry a value, and indeed that could extend the mission of value as a value bearer to actually be the source of positive value for the society. It's not there that somebody is trying to make an artifact and hopefully get rich by generating that artifact, and our standard is just teaching them how to decide who's going to be harmed in terms of societal or cultural or legal values that they hold, and assist them in protection. So we have a far more holistic perspective on value disposition and enrichment of societal values than just mere concept of detecting threats, which are aspects of the so-called security and protecting against them. That dimension is not often appreciated by people who see our standard as kind of a societal risk management. We really want to turn it on its head. It's societal value fostering and enhancement and progression mechanism. On the way, we might also do some harm, and we assist you to block or minimize or mitigate those harms as well.
I also see some in the chat, actually. I see some people talking about value leads and any further thoughts on value leads and so on. And yes, that's something that I share. Also, in fact, Uli Weinberg, myself, and Claudia Nicolai have sit together thinking about what should such a person be like. What does he or she needs to know? And yes, this person needs to have some system engine, shouldn't be afraid of IT systems, yeah, should have some knowledge there, but also should have some philosophical knowledge, some understanding of values, and how they can also enrich us. Also in the way that Ali just said, we want to build beautiful technology, yeah? So that's, I hope that the GDTA Alliance and people, everyone here on the call, can come up with ideas on how to build such a training, because that would be wonderful to roll out across the world with you. It would be awesome. And I think Kenza is also now saying something, has a question.
Yes. Hi, Sarah. I hope you can hear me and see me.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Sarah, in your presentation, you mentioned the importance, especially for startup. You know, when they build up their business models, usually the startup founders start with creating value for society. So the first idea they have is usually really good, and then they have to press that idea in a business model that creates financial benefits so that they get investment. And yeah, so I'm still thinking, you said now the investors are starting to see the value in this process and are starting to invest in value-driven business models rather than financial profit-driven business models, let's say. I'm not sure, actually. So I wanted to ask if you have really experienced that, because from your presentation, I had the feeling, you know, the founders are the ones running behind the money and building the bad business models. But all founders I have met now start with an idea that offers value for society, and then they have to pivot as long as that doesn't generate any financial profits, because otherwise they don't get a VC investment.
Yes. Several things here. Yes, it's true that investors come here with some great idea that they have come up with by themselves or with one or two friends. But the VBE approach helps them to challenge that idea in a very strong way. And it helps them to see a lot of positive potentials. I've done that with a telemedicine startup here in Vienna, where you see your business vision moving into another direction, but potentially one that is more worthwhile pursuing than you initially thought. First thing. Second thing, you see a complexity that today many people rush in, even if they get money. It takes them a year or two to realize that they won't make it. We help them to see the complexity from the start. And the investors who are putting money into VBE, if I was an investor, I'd run a small company always through this process, because then I know where I'm putting my money. Yeah, it's much richer than a business canvas thing. So if you can, as long as you have rational investors who want to build a good storyline, this can really help. And I've seen it in the cases that we build. I don't see what, investment is not only about the money side, it's also about the cost side. And I also don't think that the current investment way, where you take 10 startups that you are funding and then 9 you are counting to go bankrupt from the day one, no, I deeply believe running companies through VBE, you have 5 companies successful, at least. You don't burn the young people and your capital to that extent. This is why I would do it,
We're in our break time now already. So I would allow ourselves like 5 minutes of little bio break, coffee break, whatever, and then meet again in 5 minutes here at the screen. I would love to continue the discussion here, but well, I think we have some time later as well during the panel situation to make that, to make some other questions answered. Let's take a break. And for those of you who want to continue talking, of course, you can talk here because the call is still open. I'll take a little break here and see you back in 5 minutes. Hello, back again here at our GDTA Spotlight Special. Hope you had a relaxing 5 minutes here. And now we move into the second round, which we want to start. It's actually, we want to learn more with people who are already dealing with ethical issues in their environments, in their companies, organizations. And Sarah was proposing that we start with Lohan Spies, because he was actually the first experimenter around. He got the first chance to really try it out. And Lohan, first time that we are meeting today here, you are in South Africa right now, is it right?
That's correct.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for joining, and let's start maybe in with a 5-minute Q&A session. And I think Sarah should be involved as well, because you and Lohan, you were driving this together, and maybe you could assist me when asking questions. Actually, to introduce Lohan Spies is the CEO and founder of DIDx. Do I pronounce that right?
That's correct, yes.
The Digital Identity Extraordinary. I like that term very much. And DIDx focuses on self-sovereign identity, and they call themselves the thought leader in this space in the African continent. But Lohan acts also as the CTO. Are you still in that position of the UNICEF YOMA platform, the CTO?
Correct.
Yeah. And so when you got in touch with that kind of approach, as I read, that was something it was not totally new. It was actually something you were applauding to. You were saying, yeah, there's something which is helping me to do something different. So to explain, maybe you can explain briefly, how did you approach that? How did you, what was your thinking before, and how did IEEE, at least it was not released at that time when you started doing it, you were actually kind of doing a prototype. How did that help you?
So it's actually quite interesting. One thing that Dr. Scherer showed on one of the slides that I didn't know is that YOMA initially started off with this idea of being a AI aggregating platform and then matching the youth to employment opportunities. That's new to me, but it's very interesting, because when I joined the YOMA group, it was during a design sprint exercise in Cape Town, and we had youth, about 5 youth from 5 different countries, let's say about 20, 25 youth from all over Africa participating in this design thinking workshop. And then they invited me through mutual friends. I was invited to this workshop. And then one of the things that came up is this notion of trust and privacy. And they didn't really know how they can handle it. And I come from a self-sovereign identity background, which is very much aligned with the concept of IEEE 7000 in terms of privacy and trust. And I kind of put my hand up and I said, well, I have a solution for the problem that you are facing. And that is how I became involved in the YOMA project, is by kind of coming from a technical perspective and looking at what are the values that they are busy discussing and how I can actually alleviate or to a large degree solve those problems. So that was kind of my start working with the YOMA project. And when I met Dr. Scherer and this whole concept of IEEE 7000 and value-based engineering, it resonated very, very well with me, because the technology from a self-sovereign identity perspective is very much aligned about giving people power back, adhering to their values, adhering to privacy, adhering to trust. So for me, I had a natural alignment with what EVRs is all about. And what changed for me is coming from that kind of philosophy or that belief that we should have power and control over data and how we interact with systems and what we share. After I went through the whole process, there are quite a lot of things that then came to the fore that I didn't really thought about before. And for me, that was the very interesting thing about going through this whole process, is looking at the system from a holistic perspective, but through the view or the lens of your user. And as soon as you do that, you start looking at the system in a complete different way, because as one of the questions in the Q&A session is like, I think people struggle to understand how this can be beneficial from a startup perspective, because people just want to build stuff and make money as quickly as possible. But I completely agree with this idea of dormant value potential, because once you really start looking at the system from this perspective, there is so much value that is today actually completely untapped, because it is not part of the business model. The business model is purely to make money, regardless of ethics or morals or values. So for me, it just expanded my view of system design completely in a whole different paradigm. I'm thinking about things completely different after this whole episode.
Yeah, I had a similar experience at the workshop with Sarah. Even if you're running just through a kind of a model project, and that adds for me. I would add another question. You know, you're talking about this kind of full business approach. Should we think of, or did you think of, kind of value-based business model canvas approach? So this, or business or value model canvas. So integrated from the very beginning in the whole thought patterns around this startup. Question from the other side: if you would start a new company now, would you do this with a completely different approach than before your experience with the UNICEF UMA platform?
Yes, absolutely. I believe that we are moving to a world where values and ethics in systems will become more important, because we have seen firsthand what happens if you don't have them in your systems and what the outfall of that might be. So I believe we're moving into a world where people are going to be much more focused on what values do the system bring. Is the system aligned with my values and my ethics, or is it completely against my values or my ethics? And we became so accustomed that we will always throw this card of, you know what, it gives me convenience. And I think convenience is a random card that people just throw out normally, because they kind of try and justify for themselves why would they, for instance, give all their data away to a platform. So for me, absolutely. And I think if you take this, the standard, and you design it into new startups, you'll actually start to identify things that are very valuable from a business model perspective, for instance, that you previously didn't even see, you didn't even acknowledge that it exists. So yes, absolutely. I think this is a way that in future, I think there will be a requirement from VCs, etc., in the long run, that will say, if you can't show me how you conform to the values, etc., of your customers, then I might not even be interested in investing. And I think it's just going to add another tick in the due diligence box from VCs in the future. So yeah, absolutely, I'll definitely use it again. And the more you use it, the more deeper you can go into all the values and the ethics. So you can unpack more and unlock different things that you never knew was possible before.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks a lot. So that's a big task, Sarah, now, you know, either with or without Osterwalder, you have to redesign the business model canvas significantly, I'm pretty sure. So why not open our panel and just stay there. Sarah, Konstantinos, Lohan, you're part of the panel as well. But I would like to call now Kenza. Kenza and Sebastian, please also open your video so that we have the complete panel here. Thanks a lot for joining. And maybe we start with Kenza. Kenza, I see Abbou, you are the new director client engineering at DACH, which means the German speaking European countries at IBM. You call yourself a thought leader in AI. You were with AI activities since lots of years. You are an advisory board member. You're a TEDx speaker. You're top 40, under 40. And you used to be, until last year, you used to be the senior manager, robotics and artificial intelligence at Deutsche Telekom. And we briefly talked about the whole issue of IEEE standard, value-based engineering, and so on. And what is the current state if you are looking into IBM? How intense is the role that topic plays right now, and what is the view onto those standards like IEEE 7000, which is a front running standard? Kenza, thanks for being here with us.
Yes, yeah, thanks Uli for inviting me. I have to be very careful, obviously, since I only joined IBM in last November, so I can't really talk too much, but my personal view and what I have witnessed in the last 4 months. I mean, IBM has been really engaged since, or is engaged since many years in making technology trustworthy and making it building more value for society and not just building technology for the sake of technology. So this is, so let's say the mindset, the right mindset is there, and this is why I joined the company. IBM also stepped back for some technologies that didn't work properly in the past. So specifically here, I'm talking about facial recognition. And we have very high standards on building AI, so trustworthy AI, and we have developed tools and assets. Many of them are commercial, so they are included in the products, but many of them are also open source. So they are just there for the tech community to use. And now about my role specifically, what we do with my team is we co-create with our customers minimal viable products. And every time we have AI use cases, or every time we are using machine learning, from the beginning, we introduce exercises where we also talk about the trustworthiness and what do we want to achieve with this AI solution. And we look much further than just the business need, let's say. So we include the users and the society and the humans in general much more in the discussion. So we have, let's say, we have the technical tools, and what we do now is to include more, include them in the methodology, let's say. So the methodology we are using in our MVPs or our engagements with the customers together are based on design thinking and lean startup. So it's a mixture. It's an IBM garage methodology, which is a mixture of design thinking and lean startups. And our designers are trained in design thinking, obviously. And now we are training them in trustworthy AI. So really how to combine those two concepts and to make them part of the whole exercise. And it's interesting to see how customers also react to that. So sometimes, I mean, it generally depends on the maturity level in AI adoption. And so depending where the customers stand on that maturity level, if we say, okay, we would also like to discuss about trustworthy AI in the first workshops, it's like, well, okay, but let's solve the business problem and then I talk about trustworthy AI, but we want to include it. So depending on the maturity, we have the buy-in and we go for it. And if they are rather not so sure, so we put some exercises in there, and at the end, they're positively surprised how that changes the solution. So here, I totally agree with Sarah's presentation earlier. When you bring this topic very early in the design phase of the product, you actually change the whole solution. And this is the right moment to do it. So this is why I'm really pushing that with the team. So that's in that stage where the ideas are being created and the solutions are being created, that we discuss it then. That is the best timing. So that, yeah, that would be my...
Thanks, Kenza. And yeah, I would fully agree. That is also what I found out in that short amount of time where I got a chance to dig deeper into the value-based engineering approach. And let's find out if Sebastian Wieczorek has similar experiences at SAP, and he can actually he can talk a little bit more on a longer experience, because he is 11 years with SAP so far. He's the Vice President Artificial Intelligence Technology at SAP. He's also a part of the study commission of artificial intelligence of the German Parliament. He's consulting as an independent expert for the European Commission, and I guess that is also in AI. And so I think you have some slides prepared, or you just want to talk, or how do we go? So what is your experience listening to Kenza and to Sarah and to Konstantinos and Lohan, and there's Sebastian. The stage is yours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks. No, I didn't prepare slides. I think that thanks for the great discussion and the great presentations until now. I think it's also, yeah, gave me a lot of food for thought. I think that in my opinion is it's very interesting to hear, but I think it's also part of let's say the context of each person and the let's say the experience and also the roles of people where they put focus on. Now, when we look at the SAP perspective, and I'm obviously speaking with my own out of my own context, I'm looking at AI ethics not just from the beginning or from the middle parts, but what I'm trying to do and what we're trying to do at SAP is to look at it throughout all stages, right? So what we have been doing is we have been very early in the process in defining guiding principles for us as a company, and what we have been doing as well is that we broke these guiding principles down into concrete actions that people have to take care of when they're dealing with AI projects. And here, AI projects means that from use case identification, ideation, till running AI feature in production, there are requirements that you have to fulfill. That means in the ideation phase, I think that's when we have these discussions about values, when we have the discussions about certain concepts that we need to acknowledge. We are also discussing about red lines, of course. So what are the things that we at SAP don't want to do at all? But then when you go further in the process, let's say you have an initial idea, you have a product idea, then you're talking about what kind of data sources do you have at hand? What do you do with this data? What is in what form is this data representative? Do you need personalized data, or you need or you can use anonymous data for the purpose? Then you go into production where you develop the systems around the AI algorithms. So a lot of things also happen when you're defining of how you present something to users, or how you integrate certain functionality into your product. So, for example, if you are creating a chatbot, does this chatbot get a human name, or does this chatbot get a name like, I don't know, the supply chain support robot, for example? So people that are interacting with it understand it's not the human that they're chatting with. Or is this chatbot communicating in only in natural language, or is it also giving you choices where you can press buttons so people understand, okay, this is not a human. The human would not tell me to press yes or no buttons if I in case I understood it. Then you go into production where you have from an ethical perspective requirements, like where you want to safeguard that the context which you thought was relevant for your product is still maintained. So we're talking about data drift, for example. It means while when you built your models, you looked at, is the data representative of what I want to do? And you have certain assumptions about what your users are and what the data is that is then used in production. In production, you obviously need to check and verify that this is still the case, that is still that the data that you used was actually representative. So you need to do drift detection. You need to do things like providing explainability to users. You need to make sure that there is a certain degree of transparency when it comes to, or we talk about local explainability, or in some cases transparency about why did the algorithm in this moment with the input that I gave it came up with a certain result, and how can I request to get this analyzed by someone, especially if you're not a user of the system. So thinking about, for example, a loan application, the person who is the subject of the interaction then is not even interacting with the system. It's sitting on the other side of the table, and someone in a bank is putting in data and getting credit loan scores, for example. And then, so in operation, you also have duties that you have to fulfill, and the policy that we have defined for SAP and we have rolled out is binding for all employees. So what we have to do, what all SAP employee has to do who is interacting with an AI use case, is to comply with the policy. And it means that in every step, in every phase that I now described, there are certain requirements that people have to look at and that people have to document that they have been looking at it. And there's a process on top that when they're let's say we call them high risk use cases or risk use cases in terms of ethics, like when they're touching ethically sensitive topics, then we also have a review that is guided by the AI Ethics Steering Committee. We're publishing who is member of that on our external website to make sure that the policy, especially in those cases that are let's say risking or that are close to or have a potential to violate our global standards, that we're going into a 4 eyes principle here and do investigation about whether the principles that we have been defining are applied then in practice.
Thanks a lot. While you were talking, I was thinking about the session we had 2 years ago, where your colleague Martin Fassunge was there, and that was the time 2 years ago when SAP was involved in developing the Corona app, and what we discussed at that time, because there was a lot of political discussions about how to handle the data. Is it centralized? Is it decentralized? And how can we make sure that the data is not misused? Maybe looking back now 2 years, how would you think, or did at that time, did ethical issues play a role, or in the development phase, even if it was a very fast forward, high speed development together with the Deutsche Telekom? At that time, Kenza was at the other company. So did that play a role, or was it not? And the second question from my side is, would it have been, if IEEE 7000 would have been there as a standard, do you think the development would have run in a completely different direction?
These are hard questions for me because I was not directly involved in building that app. But what I can say is, first of all, because of the decentral nature, and because there was no central access to the data, there was no possibility to do any AI case on top of it, right? So because of certain design decisions that have been taken, and I know that, like, you all probably know that from the press, there were certain design decisions that have been taken prior to handing this project over to SAP and Deutsche Telekom, where another attempt to implement this app and the system, the backend behind it, has been failing or has been stopping. So in my opinion, I think everybody who was part of the project, I'm sure, I know some people and talk to them, I'm sure, have been having a lot of considerations and have been very careful in what they were doing, because they were under extreme supervision by the public. They also went into reviews with NGOs, looking into the code, looking into the concepts. Whether or not the system would have changed in applying certain standards, I cannot tell, but I think that my impression at the time was that there was nearly no room for for defining the specs of this software in a different way. I think it was the definition of it was very clear, and there was little margin and also little room for let's say going into longer discussions about changing the scope when the project started, because it was running so late already, and the public already when it was handed over was feeling that it is delayed even before we started to implement on it.
Yeah.
Or maybe Kenza, you have a different view on that.
Maybe Kenza, you have the telecom view on that.
No, unfortunately, it's the same. I was not directly involved in their development, so I can't tell. I just heard that they were following obviously the highest standard, and this is why also it took a little bit long. The more restrictions you have, the longer it takes.
Yeah, but maybe also the same question to Sarah, you know, because Sarah, you were also witnessing that kind of development, and you might have thought there is a, especially also Sebastian was talking about that very important decisions were taken before by different people, by non-tech people somehow, by political, and as I remember, that took quite long. That kind of decision process took quite a while, and there was big public discussion. Sarah, did you witness that, and what was your thought on that? On the
well, in fact, since I'm a privacy scholar for a very long time, I was working with the DPAs in order to determine what the architecture should look like. But to bring us back to the subject of now this meeting, I must say, as to try to bring it in perspective, is for the Corona app, you already knew that you wanted to avoid mass-scale surveillance. You already knew that the privacy value was that value that was to be tackled. And when you have that already on the table, then it's not 7,000 that you must be using when you already know exactly what value it is. The 7,000 value-based engineering helps companies to broaden their perspective on a dormant positive value potential to drive a business, yeah, or to avoid doing wrongs, and then their privacy can be something. So yeah, in the Corona app, value-based engineering was not what you would necessarily do, yeah. I'm just wondering, before I give to Konstantinos, who has an idea here, is for Kenza, is could you imagine, because could you imagine to actually do VBE at IBM, especially since you are saying you're running it on trust, but trust is just trustworthiness, which is originally technically the reliability of things. For me, at least in my understanding of the word, it's only one value. What about dignity? What about all those other values? First of all, do you look at them when you refer to the term trustworthy AI? And could you imagine that value-based engineering adds something to your processes that you might find interesting?
Yeah, Sarah, I'm glad to try to answer it, but maybe if they ask the Konstantinos raise his hand, maybe if it was directly a comment on your last observation, maybe it could be worth to hear Konstantinos first, because that we would change the subject with the trustworthy AI. That's why.
Yeah, you are right. Thank you. These are two different questions, and I agree with Uli and who brought this to discussion, because this is a very interesting study case for the future, because something that was very needed, and there were failures, monumental failures across Europe. And the question is, why did so many system architects and developers fail? And it was not just the technical difficulty, it was really the difficulty to gain, let's say, the trust of the European citizens. And here, Sarah made an interesting comment that once you know that you have to do it, then what went wrong there? And I would like to give the floor to Ali, because Ali and his team, they developed precisely in record time a system that was aimed to assess the quality of such contact tracking applications, also with respect to their, let's say, taking into account privacy considerations, but also others. And we did this because we realized this is needed. And we made it open source, we made it public, but I think nobody used, because the designers, I don't know why, it was time pressure or arrogance or whatever, they thought they don't need this. And there were massive failures to the continent. And this is not something we can really repeat so easily, in my opinion. Ali, would you like to say something about it?
Yes, thank you. Whilst we were given the task of looking at characterizing ethical properties of complex AI implementations, we faced this global challenge that COVID was wreaking havoc globally, and there were no vaccines in sight either. So we just felt here is a major humanitarian case. Many states from the Far East to Western Europe and USA are developing contact tracing applications and solutions, and unfortunately, humanity doesn't seem to be able to trust these things for some reason. So these were not that successful. Wherever you look at it, the proportion of the society and citizens who were expected to adopt these applications for successful prevention and protection were dismally low, even in Western Europe. So we dropped everything, all of our program. Konstantinos allowed us to completely digress and go into this territory of what are the ethical properties of any mitigation technology that's going to help us, because that was humanity's only solution at the time. We didn't have any other universally available and accessible technology to protect the citizens against the spread of COVID. So we basically embarked spontaneously, without any prior consideration or remit or planning, on discovering the characteristics, ethical characteristics that would enhance public trust. Because in our view, the reason citizens who were exposed to these major threats were not showing much interest, and there was only technological solution over the horizon, you would have expected everyone to embrace it and jump at it as a means of self-survival and protection. Anyway, we spent about 3.5 months of hard work by a panel of very dedicated experts, weekends, evenings, you name it, and came up with a major characterization of fundamental ethical values and properties that these systems should have to engender trust in the society before a government spends money on just saying, here it is, go and download it, and from tomorrow you'll be tracked and traced for your own good. That looked at privacy, it looked at aspects of accountability, and looked at matters of trust. And a major report was published, as Konstantinos mentioned, under a Creative Commons license, shared globally. And we gave a presentation and a webinar in October 2020, just to help the global community understand that technology by itself, whether it brings fortune to somebody or not, should not be pursued independent of societal impact and trust basis. And even in a very desperate situation, such as ravages of COVID, society who doesn't trust where this technology is going, where the data are going, what are the sunset terms, is it centralized, who else is going to have access to their personal data, they're not going to trust it, even though it's a lifesaver. And frankly, we still believe that is probably the kind of approach that's required as Sarah has gone through the whole process. We didn't, Uli made and Sarah made also a very good point. If you already know what qualities are essential to your work, we have this ethics certification program that has those qualities characterized. We have characterization of transparency, accountability, privacy as huge sets of criteria, which are smart criteria. They're not checkboxes, they're not QA and audit stuff. And this is part that our initiative in COVID, which is still available as a Creative Commons shared resource globally via IEEE website, is one such initiative under the ethics certification program. But it was entirely unplanned and entirely driven by circumstances.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that clarification. Very, very nice insights actually from your side, and it's yeah, I think I'm pretty sure that we were losing time, because at that time, you know, because this whole thinking we are talking about here was not really broad spread at that time. So, and now it is still not broad spread. So we are broadly spread. We are still working on that, and that is a question to our representatives from large companies. Sarah Spiekermann, Sarah was talking about the value leads, and Kenza, you were talking about your activities, the people who are design thinking driven, and Sebastian, you are in a company where also design thinking plays a large role. So where do you see? Would you state that you have this kind of value lead people already in the organization, if they don't call themselves that way, but they are doing this? And if not, how can we train them, and what kind of role could the design thinking community play there? That's maybe Kenza, you have your microphone open. Start.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Okay, so there were many questions in the round, and to comment something, maybe we do have a societal problem that people don't believe the systems anymore. People don't trust their governments anymore, and there is no difference if we're talking about Africa or Germany. And this we saw in the adoption of the Corona war. But I want to change the subject. To your question, I mean, there are many companies who started defining own guidelines when it comes to developing AI, and SAP, also Deutsche Telekom was one of the first ones, and really putting that into the processes from design until operations through the whole life cycle. So I see two movements. There is a top-down movement. So from the company's headquarters, driven usually by governance or CSR departments, you name it, maybe different companies, different organizations. But there is a top-down movement, but there's also a bottom-up movement. So I have witnessed at Deutsche Telekom, and same at IBM, many employees have the will to build technology for the better, for human race. And so for me, those could be the value leads, as Sarah said. Of course, we don't have this title yet, and we would have to identify the people, let's say, and maybe create this profession. Why not? But I see it. Many people are really active, and employees just, you know, individually, because they have these values and they want to make the world a better place, let's say. And this is really nice to see. And if we manage to get those initiatives, to put them together, you know, join forces, I'm sure there's much we can do, and in a positive sense. But I think you still need this combination. So you need both motions, the top down and the bottom up.
Yeah, thanks. Sarah, you have a comment on that.
Yeah, a challenge that I see is that also value leads in the way we have been thinking about it in the standard and also discussed it. It's a profession. It's really something that people need to learn. We use the term value a lot. We think we know what our values are. But ask anyone in your team, can you define what a value is? Can you define to me what privacy is, what trust is, what accountability is, what dignity is, what safety is, what security is? They'll be like, okay, yeah, I have a notion of what that term stands for, but they don't know really, because working with values is really, really difficult.
And it's not necessarily.
Yeah, I think it's so that's a challenge I always have after studying values for so many times from an academic perspective.
Yeah.
You know, I come from an academic perspective, so I have this. Yeah, I know what's theoretically there. It's like somebody who has studied system engineering, yeah, and he meets a person who has worked his stuff in the garage, and both of them have a knowledge. But there is a lot out there for companies to take, and I don't know how to
I mean, yeah, it's I agree that a word can be interpreted in different ways by different people, definitely. But coming back to your question earlier, what we mean under trustworthy AI, and this is not just a buzzword, but it is really a framework. So there is the transparency component in it. There is the fairness, the robustness, the security, and the privacy. And under each of these components, we have also a tech solution. Okay, so we have a model that can detect bias in data. We have a model that can detect algorithms in data. We have a platform that when you run your AI, your machine learning algorithms in a company, if they are connected to this platform, the platform is continuously monitoring if there's a bias that is coming back. So after you identified it and erase it, not 200%, of course, we know that's not possible, but so for us, this is quite technical. So if we're talking about trustworthy AI, it has a technical component. If we're talking about the philosophical components, that might be a broader interpretation. But we have tech people. So, you know, we try to focus on a technical understanding so that we all have the same understanding. When we talk about trustworthy AI, we know exactly what we're talking about because we have the assets, we have the tools that we can run and see how they work. So yeah, it depends. If you have this definition, then people will have a common understanding. If we don't, then obviously each person would, would have an interpretation and yeah, philosophical discussion.
I think the question that I would then ask you is, what happens to dignity? For instance, it's in the AI Act on the first page. It's the biggest trouble for Facebook right now. It undermines the dignity of a lot of the users, for instance, their mental health and things like that. Now you have this wonderful framework for trustworthiness, and you have a lot of values hooked up to that. But what happens if something pops up? And so many things pop up, as many people use a lot of the IBM systems in your case, and you haven't thought about it.
Yeah.
Then you are what happens then? How do you prepare for that?
You have to deal with it, Sarah. This is something not new. It is, I mean, I'm a trained engineer. It is impossible to find a solution that would solve all theoretical problems and that will solve all possible uses of technology. You cannot predict how humans will react and will interact with technology. So you build a tool for a certain purpose, and then people use it for other purposes, and then you're surprised by yourself that people you never have thought they could use it that way. But then you have to manage the situation. So if it's something wrong, then you have to stop it, you have to correct it, you have to take it back, obviously. But I don't think it is at all possible to predict all scenarios before you build the thing.
I agree, probably, but I would like to ask Lohan at this point, who has run to value-based engineering. Lohan, are you still there? What is your perspective on that?
My perspective on that you can or cannot not catch all the potential variations.
Yeah, I mean, we have worked on trying to catch a lot with you. So that's why I'm asking you. And you know, you are both from the corporate world. What do you think?
I agree that I don't think that you can catch everything at once. But for me, practically going through the process, I also don't believe that the value-based engineering process is a once-off. It's not like you do it once and you build a system and we're done. And I think the catch-all will come in where you need to reiterate. You do it, you build a system, you see what the users are doing. Are there unintended consequences? Are there things that you missed? And I think if you go through the process iteratively as you design the system, then at some point, sure, you will catch most. And for me, at least, value-based engineering is definitely not a once-off process. You need to work it into your design process as an iterative process consistently, because things change and people will use technology in ways that you didn't intend. And yeah, so for me, I don't think it's a catch-all, but it is an iterative process. And through that iterative process, you will catch a lot. But at the end of the day, people will ultimately try and break systems. People will try and use systems in unintended ways. And the only way that you will figure that out is by doing it and then seeing the results for yourself. That's something that you cannot predict.
Yeah. Yeah. Sebastian, you have a point with.
Yeah, there's one thing that I would like to add to the discussion. I think, and I think that's, Kenza, you can comment on whether that's the same for IBM. I guess so. What I see is that many of the use cases that we're looking at SAP, they're on a level where not that many, let's say, ethics implications are actually present. So that's why when I explained what we're doing, we have, for example, a use case where you're matching invoices against payments, right? So it's an automatic process of doing line item matching, so to understand what invoice has been, how many invoices, what invoices have been paid, so that you can file that for tax, right? You look at this use case. Obviously, it's a fully automated process. No, since we're in a business-to-business context, it's not even humans paying something to other humans, but it's companies paying to other companies. It's the risk that you're violating or that you're touching certain human values is very low. Then you have other cases, and where I talked about this, let's say, what we're considering high-risk cases, where, for example, we're doing pre-screening of applicants for jobs, right? So you're applying for a job, you're putting your CV in, and we're doing that also in a B2B business. So it's not about somebody applying to SAP, but somebody applying to a position that a customer of SAP has been created on a system that SAP is providing. That's basically the reality. And then you have to decide for yourself what is the right process. So what is the meaningful hiring process that does not go against the let's say ethical principles that we as a company have been setting up, and that also our customers are relating to. And I think there, in my opinion, it makes a lot of sense, and that's where we're also, as I explained, we're putting a lot of effort in order to define these processes in the right way, to define the products in the right way, because there it's critical, in my opinion. I wouldn't say that we should not do automation in that case. So if you think about it, you could say, okay, we don't use AI in cases where humans where humans are interacting, but because we're afraid of discrimination, for example. But then when you think about it, where is the discrimination in automating this process coming from? The discrimination is coming from all the examples that our systems learn from the past. So if we're not automating it, the logical consequence is that it will stay like it is. We will have this implicit unknown biases with people going through the process, and technology is not just a threat to this process. It's not just a threat to discriminating people, but it's also a way to making that explicit and to making that transparent and to making that manageable. So it doesn't mean, in my opinion, that we should not do it. It means that we have to be very careful of what we're doing. We have to be very careful in how we're designing it. We have to be very careful of what are the different roles, how are we using this, who is then taking responsible for the decisions that are taken, are that humans taking the responsible or not, and so on and so forth. I'm just giving now 2 examples, and I think we have to, when we're talking about what do we have to do in looking at AI applications, in my opinion, we have to differentiate between, let's say, how much potential does it have to touch sensitive topics, and how big is the impact on individuals, and maybe also or probably also on societies. And that's when you look into regulation that is coming up at the moment, like the AI Act. That's basically what you see in these discussions as well, and that's how regulation is also going, in my opinion.
I think Ali, okay, I will just be very brief. When you have a technology like this one, where human beings are screened by an AI, as such, you run into a dignity problem. That dignity problem is much larger than bias. And this is exactly where we are coming in with 7,000. We don't go with a list, where somebody said bias is a thing you have to look out for. We work with you to understand what's the dignity issue with that kind of software. And then we try to help you understand whether you want to invest in this kind of technology, and if you really want to do it, how many things and aspects of dignity you have to watch out for. And 80 to 90% will have nothing to do with bias.
So bias was just to clarify that bias is just one aspect that we're looking at, of course. And I think you're right. But on the other side, and that's maybe Sarah, you can answer to that as well. I feel that in the discussion about AI, what people tend to forget is that we have the same issues in software in general, and we actually also have the same issues, in my opinion, in every human process as well. So the topics we're discussing about when you talk about dignity, right? So we obviously have a system where people are making themselves vulnerable by presenting themselves in a way, and they get either elevated to the next stage or they get rejected. That's the basic system that we have, right? And now you can say we do that on the free will of a person looking at that. You can say we do that with some rule-based technology, defining what has to happen, or you do it AI-based, or you do it, I don't know, by randomness or whatever you apply. There are funny experiments of randomly hiring people, for example, that yield similar results. You can, I think some of you may be familiar with that too. So I think the interesting part is that we're discussing a lot of these issues in relation to AI, and I think that's important. For me, I think it's important to look at that. But what I'm feeling as well is that the idea of let's not do it with AI then is, in my opinion, the wrong one. So I feel that in this discussion, usually it sounds like there are so many issues, there are so many things that you can get wrong with AI. You have to be very careful. It somehow creates a pushback for technology, which, in my opinion, is problematic. And that's what I was saying, because the original process also has its flaws, and probably nobody is or people have not been taking or noticing the issues of that process in the past as well. So that's what I'm also seeing when we're looking at this, and that's why I'm saying that especially these high-risk cases, in my opinion, of course, we're very careful and we're trying to be as thorough as possible, looking at it from all angles, looking at what are the principles. And I think we can discuss about whether we're looking at it from whether the principles that we're applying are the right ones, or whether we have to look at it from different angles or use different techniques. I think it's an interesting discussion. But I think what I also would like to mention is that the alternative is not to not do it, but the alternative is then to look at non-AI solutions in the same way and to assess them in the same way.
Ali has his hands raised, I think.
A quick observation about this debate, folks, from myself, and that is we cannot address all ethical issues purely in design, especially for adaptive systems such as AI. If our classical designs with fixed transfer functions, we have empirical evidence and huge amount of background knowledge and experience from the past, such as safety engineering, so be it. It works exceedingly well with safety engineering. It doesn't quite work that well with security engineering, but security engineering is about the future, not about yesterday. And you can never predict the new attack vectors, you can never predict the new attack mechanisms, etc. So security engineering cannot be fixed by design alone. And this is a question of a priori and a posteriori type perspectives, that in an adaptive system, where due to future training, due to creep in data and emergence of bias, such as Kenza referred to, we cannot say we have thought of all of those. We cannot possibly predict all the facets of future, and by necessity, design, as the way I see at least the context of AI, as a new challenge for engineering and industry and society, frankly, is that design is a fantastically suitable but insufficient guarantor of ethical problems.
I agree, which is also the reason why in 7000 a result of the process is not only technical design, it's also administrative and organizational measures. EVRs can to a large part be organization administrative measures without a technical next step.
So I'm just looking at the time here, and we are a little bit over the scheduled 5:30 here in Germany, and the discussion is quite vivid. I like that very much, and but I see also some people are leaving because we had scheduled it until 5:30, and I would, if there is not, Ali, do you have raised your hand for another statement, or
no,
if
that's
not,
from the past, sorry.
If not, usually I would have given everyone the voice for a last sentence, for a last idea, for a last wish, but I think, should we do that? Yes, I think we should do that. So what you, from your perspective, would wish in terms of value-based engineering and IEEE 7000 in your organization or for the society, what should happen pretty soon and to make that come alive and get a broader audience? Kenza, what do you think?
It's a difficult question, Uli. Actually, sorry. Because I would really, my wish would be that the whole world starts. We need a new system, basically, because the system we're living in just doesn't work. So it's not only a responsibility of tech companies, you know, to think more about values in their business models. I totally agree, but we need to take this broader. So investors, governments, politicians, people, we think we need to build up a new system, and I hope that this is a tool that could be adopted, at least, you know, in the industry and in the corporate world, and hopefully if we can show that it is possible to change for the better, we can have the others also join. But yeah, I think it belongs really to a bigger discussion.
Right, we should do that. Sebastian, any thought? Any wish?
I have a lot of wishes. Yeah, from my perspective, I think it was an interesting discussion, and I will certainly look into the details to see how that maps what we're doing at SAP. What in general I feel is that it's a bit coming out of research as well. It's a bit the feeling that I had initially when Sarah, when you presented, was that it's a great tool, which is working if you put it in the right hands, right? So there's a lot of learning curve that you need. There's a lot of upfront investment into people that are experts on it in order to work it out. And my hope would be that we somehow reduce the barrier. So because things that are coming from academia, that are coming from research, they tend to have issues in getting applied when they have so high demands and trained people that are then working on these concepts. So maybe it's something that can be considered. Or I mean, sometimes if the world is complex, then we cannot do anything about it. That's what it is. We have to work around it. But my hope would be that we can reduce the barrier of interaction, so that it's easier for people with little training or with less training to apply these methods to somehow get to a place where it's like a on the job training is possible, or in transitional learning is possible.
Thanks. I think we take that as a call to the design thinking community to lower the barriers and to help to do the translation for the tech people. Lohan, any wish from your side?
Same as Sebastian, I also have a lot of wishes, and I completely agree with Kenza that this is definitely a much broader discussion. But if I can have a wish, I would wish that we definitely create this professional career called value leads, and that we bring in the value leads in the design process. Because inherently, if you go through this process, we are designing systems, like Kenza mentioned, current systems are not working really. And the people are starting to have a lot of pushback against the current systems and centralization. I mean, there's a lot of reasons for that. So my wish would really be for this to be adopted on a broader scale, so that we can actually start from a systems design perspective, bring in the values, bring in the ethical values, etc., so that we can start designing systems that are not only working for a founder per se or a government, but are actually also working for the users. Because I think that's been the key missing piece all along. We never designed systems that are actually looking and catering for the user's needs. And the result of that is obvious. I mean, we know what the result is in today's world. So for me, that would be a wish, that we really take this concept and start deploying it and using it at scale.
Thank you, Lohan. Ali, wish from your side.
A short wish from me. Philosophically, I think we all have a societal and moral duty to help make the transition from a limited focus on shareholder value towards social value. That's the achieving ultimate goal. If we can achieve it with design thinking or 7,000 or other methodologies, that is a massive transition that has to take place. That doesn't mean social value is at odds with shareholder value, but transition is necessary.
Thanks a lot. Fully agree. And I see a lot of applause. Konstantinos, any wish finally here?
Yes, no, I have an optimism because I've been meeting people really at high level within organizations, very, very known, which really have a lot of impact. And they understand the problem. There are more people than we think. And but they are left alone. There is not network among them. They have no tools. So they try to do something, but they're left alone. So what we're doing here, we may create a network which will be visible and having also tools and systems and methods that can give them what they need. Because then if they're asked by the shareholders or the CEO or the founder, what are you doing there? You can say, this is a standard. And if we apply this standard, then we can really getting the trust that we need from the users and so on. It is not just my ideology. And for me, this is our main target group. This is what we're engaging also with policymakers, but our main target group is these people. And this is our hope, because if they achieve to do a better job where they are and influence their peers and the people around them and beneath them, then they will be creating much less problems than they're creating now. And perhaps also not only stop creating problems, but also do something good, which would be even better. But stop creating problems would be also something that we did very urgently. So this is what I see, and I'm optimistic there because there is demand there. And what we're doing here together with you, Uli, and your design school and so on, this is very important because we're precisely creating this network and this visibility, because these people don't know that we exist and we're doing these things for them.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks a lot. Sarah, last statement. Are you still there?
I really wish that we build value-based technologies for the future, for the better. That we go away from just compliance towards building a better world. And I hope so much that value-based engineering can contribute to that. And I hope so much that the GDTA, that the design thinking schools join into this force. Don't underestimate the challenge, but really help doing it.
Thank you all. Thank you very much. And also for your final words. I think that is very brilliant, and we got a lot of very, very positive response in the chat here. And I thank all of you for contributing. I think the live guests here on stage, Sarah, Konstantinos, Ali, Kenza, Lohan, Sebastian, all of you, and also Christoph Meinel, who was remotely with us. And I would also thank Anja Harnisch and Maria Aragon for the design, and last but not least, Steffi for getting the whole thing together here again. And thanks to the Global Design Thinking Alliance community, I hope that this afternoon and morning or midnight or whatever at your place was inspiring to all of you to really go on that path. Value lead education is something we have to focus on, and creating and enhancing actually what we are doing with design thinking. I think what we are discussing right now, that is the next step into the future, and it really helps the design thinking community to broaden the creativity field. Thanks a lot for joining the GDTA Spotlight Special here. 2.5 hour highly intense discussion. Lots of new insights, and thanks a lot, and see you all soon. Bye-bye.